Thanks for staying with us on the conversation. In the first half, we dealt with situations in South Africa, where the public protector has supposedly cleared President Ramaphosa of the Pala Pala farm scandal. But we still have the African Transformation Movement going against this position of the public protector. Right now, we're switching gears to Nigeria, where President Bola Tinubu has dismissed the findings of the European Union Election Observation Mission report, stating that it was a result of inadequate research. According to Tinubu, the EU did not present any substantial evidence that could raise doubts about the credibility of the 2023 election results. The president's spokesperson, Dele Alake, conveyed this position in a statement on Sunday. Nigeria conducted its general election in February and March, with supplementary elections taking place in April. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, declared Bola Tinubu the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, as the winner of the presidential poll held on February 25th.
However, his victory is currently being challenged in court by Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party and Peter Obi of the Labour Party. In its final report on the election released last Tuesday, the EU EOM acknowledged the commitment of Nigerians to democracy, but also highlighted persistent systemic weaknesses. The report called for further legal and operational reforms to improve transparency, inclusiveness, and accountability. Now, joining us before I introduce the guests, let's take a listen.
So while the 25th February elections were held on schedule, a lack of transparency and operational failures reduced trust in the process and challenged the right to vote. Voters assigned to new polling units had difficulties in identifying their correct polling unit, and the conditions in almost half of polling units observed did not ensure the secrecy of the vote. In 16 states, the mission noted incidents of violent attacks on polling units and indeed on INEC staff and harassment of voters. The counting procedures were negatively impacted by overall poor understanding, particularly in completing forms, and chaotic and overcrowded conditions.
Now, join us to discuss this report. We have Baba Abdullahi Machina, public affairs analyst and political scientist. He joins us from Damaturu in Yobe State, and also Jake Epele, CEO, the Rights Foundation Africa. He joins us from the nation's capital, Abuja. A warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I'd like to start with Baba Abdullahi. What's your assessment of the European Union Election Observer Mission report? What specific areas and evidence did the EU EOM report identify enduring systemic weaknesses in the Nigerian electoral process? And do you agree with this report, and if you do agree, to what degree?
Thank you so much for having me on your show. If you look at the reports presented by the head of European Union Election Observer Mission, head of Election Observer Mission here in Nigeria, you will understand that, first of all, I disagree with the report. I have been part of the electoral process, and also I was part of the election observer here in Nigeria from 2011, 2014, 2015, and 2019, and just of recent 2023. First of all, you need to understand that the European Union deploy less than 50 observers across the country. And we have about more than 178 polling units across Nigeria, across the 36 states, including FCT Abuja. And you deploy more than 50 observers across all these polling units. Approximately, it is one observer per state. So how do you assess the credibility of the election when you only see it maybe at the capital city of that particular state? or maybe you sit in Abuja or you sit in Lagos, you use social media commentators, you use those people who are not interested in the development of the country. And you now use that and develop your own report and now share the report with the public that the credibility of the election 2023 is being doubted, or there are no any credibility in the election. Of course, there are a lot of things that happen across the country, but we cannot totally dismiss that the election is not credible, or the election is not free, or the election is not fair. If you look at it, in Plateau State, Peter Obi, the Labour Party, won the election, the governorship election in Plateau State. If you look at my state, Yobe, in the presidential election, for the first time in history since 1999, it was the PDP that won that election. But it has never happened in the history of Yobe State, my state, in the northeastern part of Nigeria. So if I can look at it from my own perspective, from also other observers.
Baba Abdullah, can you hear us?
No.
Okay, go on, please. And while you're going on, I also want to know the level of your observation mission, because you talked about the fact that the EU had just 50 observers in Nigeria and where you observed. Let's look at the areas you observed that brought about this your insinuation that the EU report is not well-founded.
Yeah, of course. Once again, these people who call election observers sent by European Union to some other polling unit across the country. What we need to understand also is that what is the credibility of those election observers? We all know that you deploy someone who is neutral, and in real sense of that person is not neutral. And we have know how African Union, European Union deploy their own, election observers. We know the selection process, and it is not enough for you to gather data and now tell to the world that the credibility of, is being doubted. When we have other organizations, non-partisan organizations like Yaga Africa, National Association of Lawyers, and so many organizations, and they rated, the election as 100%. Most of Nigerians are happy with the election.
100%.
And this result is coming.
Abdullah, what election observation mission actually rated this election 100%? I just wanted to clarify that before I move over to Jay quickly.
Yeah, it's not 100%, it's 91%, and this is Nigerian Bar Association, an organization of eminent lawyers and and important voice in the civil space in the country.
All right. Okay. So quickly, let me bring in Jake into all of this. You mentioned the Nigeria Bar Association. You first of all spoke about 100% and 91%. Now, Jake, President Bola Tinubu believes that the EU EOM report was a product of a poorly done desk job, and our other analyst has also said that this observation mission was too low or too scanty to actually give such a report. So what evidence has President Tinubu brought forward to support the claim? And for you, what was your own assessment of the election? Do you also support what the EU EOM has said, or are you against it?
Jake, you need to unmute your device, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, so I think it's important to underscore, specific methodology that the EU used, and what is the window that brought them into observation in Nigeria. Number one, I want to clarify that, number one, I don't speak for the EU. Yes, I have a project that is being funded by the EU. Does not mean that I will support them if I feel that something is not right. They are as independent as that. But I think there's been a lot of ignorance that is being peddled around this report. Methodology, number of observers, and so on and so forth. I think there's a need for those who are trying to comment because your station is a national credible platform, and people shouldn't come and make claims out of ignorance. Number one, the report, I don't think the report is far from the yearnings of Nigerians. My co-participant or the professor who is a panelist made mention of Yaga Africa. Yaga Africa never did not. Yaga Africa is also a member of the EU partners team. However, let me point out a few things. However, this report is not an indictment or try to undermine the legitimacy of the president. No, there is no one place, 92, 93 pages of this report, there's no one place you will find that says that the legitimacy of the president is in doubt. No, not a place, you know. Were the election free and fair? I think I need to ask whoever that would doubt that to define what free and fair election is, taking into cognizance the kind of election that we had. You know, there is no doubt that even INEC has accepted that there are some aspect of the election that needs to be interrogated. That's why they are also calling for an assessment, not independent, but assessment within INEC of the entire electoral process. Now, for me, there are some aspects of the press release from the presidency that I don't think they took time out to read this report. Claims like the reports undermine the sovereignty and the integrity of the entire nation is unfounded, you know, because that's not the essence of this report, you know. And so the report presented 23 recommendations, summarized 6 thematic recommendations. I think that the president, who I must say had done a good job in terms of economic agenda and all that, should add as part of his agenda electoral reforms. There is a need to focus on that. I like to move forward. What has happened, but we need to move forward. You know, and
just like late President Jarodwa did, it did come out openly to say that, look, the election that brought me into office was highly flawed, but we will do something about it.
We're not even asking the president to say that, but to understand that there had been issues. He, the president, did complain about things like the beavers before the election, you know, and of course. So is it not right for him to call for electoral reform, which is most needed? The Electoral Act has its own flaws, you know, a bit of it. The operations of and the administration of the election has its own flaws. There is no doubt for anyone to sit here and say that INEC did well logistically. They didn't, you know. You cannot say that. You cannot say that INEC did well by not uploading the results on the IREF. No, they didn't.
Thank you, Jake. I'd like to bring Baba Abdullahi back into the conversation. Baba Abdullahi, we've had elections in this country in the past. The 2019 elections, former President Goodluck Jonathan did place a call to the winner, former President Muhammadu Buhari, and congratulated him. We've also heard about the highly touted June 12, 1993 elections, which seems to be the gold standard for elections in Nigeria. Nobody came out to say, you know, it was highly flawed and there was no presidential election petition tribunal. There have been criticisms against the Independent National Electoral Commission's performance at the last elections. They say they overpromised and under-delivered. There were issues with the IREV. There was voter suppression in Lagos, where we're broadcasting from. Certain people were not allowed to vote, and there was rigging in places like River State. So is it a bad thing to, you know, to say, look, there's no system that is perfect. These are recommendations. And this is where we feel you need to improve on. Do you think the presidency and the spokesperson threw away the baby and the bathwater? Do you think these elections were flawless?
Once again, I cannot just tell you that this election is just flawless, because anybody who is telling you this, I think, is just sentimental opinion or maybe personal interest. Nowhere election is credible in this world. And including the United States of America, we have seen what happened when Donald Trump tried to, seek for re-election against, in 2019. We have seen how low the democracy of America is, but because of the strong institution, Trump couldn't be able to, get what he wants. And coming down to Nigeria, if you look at it now, our election is just, we are just growing. And if you look at it from 1999, when we, started democracy, or when democracy, was restored in 1999, and we started, improving the electoral process or the electoral management body to 2023 election, where we have introduction of the technology and introduction of so many things that improve the integrity of the election. And you don't have, I can tell you that anybody who go into that election has the right, to contest the election outcome in the court of law. And that is what Peter Obi is doing, and that is what Atiku is doing.
Abdullahi, so now going by what you're saying, would you agree that there were flaws in this election, just like what the EOM has said? Would you agree that this election had flaws, or would you say that it was flawless?
Of course, this election is flawed, and I can tell you this, nowhere, like I said, election is 100% perfect, but we are getting there.
Okay, now, Jake, looking at this electoral reforms that you talk about, I mean, there's been a sort of agreement that this election had certain flaws which marred the credibility of the elections. Let's look at the mandate of the electorate. A lot of people were anticipating on this election and looking forward to this technological advancement for the election, talking about transmission, the IRF portal, the beavers, and all of that. With this report and so many complaints about this election, what impact do you think it will have on the mandate of the electorate and the validity of future elections if it continues this way?
Saying that we should stop trying to compare the present with our past. Every time there's a reference to, there are other election that was considered very flawed. Why are we not talking? Why should we be going back to our past? To take a man's future, take him back to his past. He will lose his vision. Let's talk about how we can make progress, how we can look at what this report is. Only a recommendation. Take it or leave it. And I think we are creating a narrative that does not project what the ideals of this country. We are a country that opens our doors and invite people to come and make contributions, do business with us, and leave us better than they met us. So it's important to put things in perspective. I think people should stop trying to pin the personality of the president and what he represents and the EU. They're two different things completely. So in answer to your question, we've tested technology. It works. It's just human being that did not allow it to work. How can we capitalize on the gains while we cry over the losses? How can we capitalize on the gains? We've seen that technology improves election. Technology is workable, is doable. The IRF worked in several elections, whether it's the off-cycle elections and the House of Representatives and the Senate election. All of that worked. It's only the presidential election that we had problem with uploading and the non-immediate and effective communication of INEC that would have put paid to some of these issues that we're having today. So we need to move forward. There are a lot more issues that this report unearthed And the report that we also sent on ETA, the issue of women, are there for us to look at. The issue of making sure we hold those who get involved in electoral offenses accountable are there. The issue of using an understanding and making sure that the populace understand the need for them to get involved in the process. Now, watch this. I think people need to read this report. The report validates that almost 93 million persons registered for this election. Only 27 million voted. We should be worried about that. For an opportunity that had never been seen before. More of the electorate were the youths. We should be worried about that. Why did they get out of the system? What is it that we can do to make sure that we bring them? The trust deficit which have been created in the whole process, we should concern ourselves about that, and I think we need to also be, okay. I started by saying that the president had done well in these few months, and we shouldn't bring negative things that will begin to create all kinds of impressions.
Thank you very much, Jake. Baba Abdullahi, in a minute, just if you can, in less than a minute before we wrap up this conversation, the presidential spokesperson has described this report as a poorly done desk job. What actions do you think the Nigerian government should take to address the concerns raised by the EU EOM report? Jake did speak to some brilliant points in that report. Should we adopt them, or should we just throw it in the trash can? Because, I mean, if you describe something as poorly done, it means you have no interest in looking at it. So what's your recommendation?
Well, I don't think if the government is very serious in improving the integrity of the election, should throw the recommendation to a waste paper basket. Any government that is interested in the development of the country and this recommendation, there are a lot of things that we can take and we can also discard, from this recommendation. If we are interested in improving the integrity of the election, also make the independent National Electoral Commission to be truly independent of anybody. So if government, went to examine, the report carefully, there are a lot of, recommendations, like my co-participant said. There are a lot of, recommendations from the.
Can you just mention one of the recommendations that you feel that should be taken? Just one quickly.
Of course, I think one of the recommendations is, to ensure that we improve the integrity of the election, by saying that the Nigerian Electoral Independent Commission is truly independent of anybody, so that it will conduct its own ability without any political interference. That when it comes to presidential election in Nigeria, we are always, like my co-host said, it's only on presidential election that Nigeria has a problem. What about other elections, governors, House of Representatives?
Thank you very much, Baba Abdullahi Machina, public affairs analyst and political scientist, joining us from Damaturu in Yobe, and also Jake Apella, CEO of the All Rights Foundation Africa, who joins us live from Abuja in Nigeria. It was a pleasure having you, gentlemen. We do appreciate your insight and your contribution to the program. Thank you.
Thank you.